Hello, everyone. Matt Malatesta here. We're back in the VYPE podcast room on my whistle with none other than Cali Werner. Okay, super freak cross-country runner. Super freak. Came out of Willis High School, and she was on one of our first covers dating back 100 years ago. Wasn't that long, but then was at Willis. Went to Rice, had tremendous success there. Broke all kind of records. You know, all kind of all conference stuff. You won a bunch of all state for UIL. Mm-hmm. I told her she should have brought all of her medals. It wouldn't have fit in the room. But you know, your real story is now even blossoming even bigger. You know, You tried out for the Olympics for being a marathon runner for the Olympics. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that we would be great friends because one of two things. There is no way I could get up early and run long distance. I'm like, you set the 10,000 meter race for Rice or the conference into Conference USA. There's no way I could ever run that far.
To give you some reassurance, I could not have all runner friends. I don't think that would be healthy for me.
Exactly.
So I've got my runner friends, I've got my non-exercise friends,
you got your pickleballers.
Yeah,
exactly. you got everything between. But now we rush on because you have such great information in regards to mental health in high school to college and athletics and how all that kind of weaves together. I mean, I could just give you the mic and you just tell us. I'll prompt you and you tell us what you think. But let's start, first of all, from Willis. When you were running there, did you realize you were that good? What made you so good?
I think this is going to sound almost arrogant, I think, but I think I was afraid to look at how good I was because I knew it would freak me out. And so I kind of always, and my coach would tell you to this day, he's still like a second dad to me, but I always kind of played this ignorance is bliss mentalities. Like all these other runners I would go against would know my splits, their friends' splits. To this day, I'm still asking my coach, what's my PR in that specific event? Because for me, it's just better to go in blind. And I think it keeps me more humble, which is probably a good thing too. But yeah, I would say I still think I have a hard time accepting the success that I had that quickly.
It was wild. It was wild. Like as a sophomore in high school, she is the thing in cross country in the state of Texas, which was wild. But why? What was it about running? Why was it cross country?
You know,
and track. I mean, it's kind of the same. Long distance.
Kind of scooped together. But I think if it were up to me, I would have totally dropped everything and played volleyball all 4 years of college. But that was not in the cards for me. That was not the gift I was born with.
Right.
I love some beach volleyball, but my talent's in running. And so I think I learned that pretty early on. My coach saw that when, surprisingly, he was my elementary school PE coach, and he also coached the high school distance runners. And so in PE, we had the turkey trot in elementary school, and he goes, you're going to run with me in high school. And then lo and behold, freshman year of high school comes around, and I didn't sign up for the cross country team. And back then, we all still had house phones. So he called and left a voicemail on my house phone and said to my parents, Mike and Jamie, Cali was supposed to come out for a first day of cross country practice. Why did this not happen? My parents gave me a nudge and I went, and I'm so glad I did because a lot came from it that I'm still kind of sifting through to this day.
Yes, a lot did come from it. Then you go from there, then you go from Rice. I don't know if you know this about Rice, but it's a very high academic school. And I do have a theory. Cross-country runners and swimmers are the same people. They're all super crazy smart. And they're very, very regimented. Let's call it regimented.
Yeah.
And disciplined. I'm neither nor of any of that, but carry on.
No, we call Rice the Harvard of the South, but that's definitely a bias from Houston. I think I was a little bit of an outlier in that, more of the like fake it till you make it kind of book smarts. I've always kind of been told I've got a lot of emotional intelligence, like ability to talk to people and speak about things that I believe in. But when it came to the academia, that was something I had to go to SAT prep classes because even if you got a full ride to Rice, you had to meet a certain standard, and I was not a good test taker. Now looking back, some of that was my OCD that I didn't know was a diagnosis at the time. But I had to work my butt off and kind of fake it till I made it with the smarts.
Well, you did it.
Thank you. Yes.
You did it.
You can exhale now.
And you are still learning. tell me about like when you're running, do you find that maybe runners are and swimmers or athletes deal with OCD more than other athletes, or is it all athletes?
Yeah, I think most of the research shows that it varies. There's a genetic component to OCD, and so we don't know how much of a genetic component there is. I do think that more pressured sports, like individuals that compete individually, like in track, in golf, in swimming, tend to increase stress, which we know increases onset of or a risk of onset of OCD, right? Like any stressor for mental illness is increased when there's added stress. So I think that though we see a lot of baseball players with OCD, right? We see a lot of gymnasts engage in some of those similar behaviors, but also OCD is not just what it looks like at the surface. I think people consider OCD to be hand washing or long showers or counting certain numbers or doing a lot of the things that you see externally. A lot of my OCD, which we'll get into later, was internal. It was what was going on in my mind that wasn't easily diagnosed from the outside eye.
So tell us what you're doing now, because you have kind of a full slate of what you're doing now as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to be a news reporter when I was in college before I got diagnosed, and I was on that trajectory. Did a really cool, fun internship with Great Day Houston and had the time of my life until the onset of my OCD kind of took over. And I look back now and I see that it was a part of OCD was a part of my life from my age of 3. I started having symptoms, but we didn't know what it was. When I finally got appropriate help, my life changed for the better. And I realized this newscaster thing is not what I want to do anymore. I decided that I wanted to be a mental health clinician and I wanted to work with athletes specifically just because there's such a niche area for highly successful athletes that are struggling with mental illness. And so currently, I work at OCD Institute of Texas as Director of Referral Relations, a behavior therapist, and I also have a private practice called Athlete Rising, where I work specifically with athletes. Got my CMPC, which is kind of for sports psychology, and it has been amazing and super fun and challenging in a lot of ways. But then my dissertation that I'm working on for PhD is on post-Olympic blues.
So
I tried to squeeze
listen. I'm like, what if I'm thinking to myself, have I really done anything like this? That is incredible because I feel like the mental health thing is it's so relevant in sports and in high school sports because it seems kind of taboo sometimes, but it used to, not anymore, I don't feel, but I do feel like you in the high school world with NIL coming and with there's a lot of money on the line. There's a lot of big things that are happening and a lot of pressure. There's so much pressure on these kids now from parents, from coaches, from outside areas. But what do you see talk about your dissertation, which I found super fascinating.
Thank you.
About the Olympic athletes.
Yeah, so with Olympic athletes on the post-Olympic blues, it seems like more of the athletes tend to struggle when they don't have a plan after the Olympics, which makes total sense, right?
Yep.
Like if they're putting their full identity in their Olympic sport, which whether you say you do or you don't, it's really hard when you're competing at the Olympics to not have that be a huge part of your identity. It's all consuming, right? And so those that are planning to start a family after, or those that are moving, or planning to train for another cycle, whatever it is, they tend to be more successful. Those that are about to retire or those that think they might be a one and done, they have a lot harder time or a dip in those intense emotions. And you know, like when you go to compete at something like the Olympics, there is nothing like that adrenal rush, right? You can't replicate it in any possible way. And so once that's over, all of those adrenals that you squeezed out tend to dip even lower than they were when they were at baseline, leading to these more intense feelings.
Yeah. So what when you see that, I mean, how do they kind of not recover, but how do they move forward?
Yeah, I think we have to start by recognizing what is feasible and what isn't for their lifelong goals. And one of my favorite, this is just a basic small exercise. I get people to write their name on a piece of paper. And around it, I want them to put adjectives that describe them that have nothing to do with their success. So things like their friends would say about them. You're funny would go on there. You're kind would go on there. Olympic champion would not go on there. And then you ask them, okay, after this big event that's coming up, or following this big event, are these things still true about you? And the answer is always going to be yes, right? Because that's a part of who they are, their personality. I think what happens is Olympians take their minds off of that, and then they stop seeing that their worth is in more than just their sport performance. And it's hard to wrap their minds around it because of NIL deals, of how when you pick up, I've talked to a lot of Olympians about that were in the interviews for this cycle. And one of the things that they said was so hard was sitting in the hotel room when they compete on one of the last days and seeing all of their competitors post that they're done.
Right.
And that was something that didn't exist really 20 years ago.
That is fascinating. So when you're at Rice and you have, what was the seminal moment for you? Like, hey, you needed to go and see somebody.
Yeah.
What was there a moment, or was it like overtime?
No, there was a moment, and it was, I had just turned 21, was trying to qualify for nationals. I had just won conference championships. And so I knew that the nationals race was in 2 weeks. And I all of a sudden had this thought that I had done something to preemptively ruin my race to compete for nationals, and I couldn't let it go. And it was a different kind of not being able to let it go. Like, you say something, you think you offended someone, and it's just a sticky thought. This was more of like, I was losing sleep. I started having these behaviors that, well, if I drink this coffee at this time today and I lose more sleep, will that affect my race in 2 weeks? Everything came to, this is all going to impact my race. And I started thinking, if I can just get through this race, all of this will go away. Like, for some reason, this race in particular has set off some switch, but I somehow got through the race, somehow qualified for nationals, but the symptoms just got worse. And it got to a point where, due to some of the subtypes of OCD that I was experiencing, I couldn't use a public restroom on campus. I couldn't go up a flight of stairs without being terrified. There were a lot of day-to-day things that I had never thought twice about that felt like it was harder than singing a song in front of millions of people.
Right.
And so my world got really small, and that's when others started to notice, right? I wasn't able to hide it anymore like I had done in high school, because some of those symptoms were present in high school. I just did a really good job of keeping them quiet or under the radar. And this was, even if I wanted to hide it, I couldn't. And my coach played a big part in helping me get the appropriate help.
Best advice now, like looking back to you being in high school or you being in college, and maybe you're a kid and you're kind of, you're stressing out, or you're having a lot of pressure on you. And what would be the best advice you give to maybe your former self, or somebody going through that at that young of an age?
I 1000% would say, do not be afraid to be preventative. I think I had this belief that, well, this is what it takes to be good. Like, in high school, one of my biggest symptoms was I couldn't tie my shoes before races because I couldn't get them to this just right place. And if my coach didn't tie them for me, I couldn't get to the starting line on time. And I thought that's what it takes to be a good runner, right? Because I was having success and I was achieving. And so I just thought, well, this must be what it takes. And so I was afraid to fix it because I wanted to continue to be good. And I would tell my former self that that's not at all the case. If you want to love your sport long term, if you want to continue to be successful, be preventative. You will never regret it, and get the appropriate help ahead of time before it gets to a place like it did where I was completely debilitated.
Dude, that is wild.
Mic drop moment.
Yeah, that is so good. So then, okay, so then tell us about, you meet this guy on kind of a random situation. Walk us through that. It all comes back to what? Running. What happened?
By this guy, we're talking about my husband, right?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. So
by this guy, there's only one guy, right?
There's only one guy.
Right.
Yeah. I lived in Montrose in Houston at the time. I had just graduated. So I just finished running, and my college coach was training me for the Olympic trials. And so I was on a run, lived close to the fire station, ran past the station, and the ambulance was pulling in, and he blew the siren at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked over my shoulder and I saw him getting out of the ambulance, and I was like, oh, that's a good looking guy. And so we got each other's digits, went on a date a few days later. I actually brought cookies to the station that night with my roommate. And yeah, the rest is history.
Whoa, that's a love story right there.
Yeah.
That's like a movie. I can just see that playing out.
You know what's funny is I actually was the one that took initiative. I went to go get a piece of paper and said, to EMS guy driving the ambulance.
Not
Do
surprising.
you ever want to get coffee sometime? Because I wanted a cool story. I was like, if I want a cool story, I've got to find it. Maybe this is my husband. And it worked out.
And how old were you?
I was 23, 24.
Boom.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
here's my having twins.
You have twins?
I have twin boy, girl twins.
Oh.
And they're 25. Girls are way more initiative. They take the initiative now.
Yeah. I took a country and western dance class at Rice. I was like super into it. And people say, how were you so bold with Tyler? And I said, I think I just got used to wanting to be on the dance floor and okay if people didn't want to dance. So I would ask, do you want to dance? And if they said no, all right, I'm going to ask the next person.
Dude, that's a great idea. You need to give advice more than just mental health. It could be dating advice. Maybe that's your next thing. Maybe that's your next initiative. Okay. I follow you on social media and I, for some reason, saw you like you were running somewhere. You run wherever you're going, you're running. You're in the mountains or you're in the desert or you're somewhere. And I'm like, what in the hell is she doing out there?
Is she exercising?
Exactly. Do you exercise in the desert? But is it still part of your life? Do you still do a lot of running? And I know you were training for the Olympic trials.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my last really big race was not this past December, but the one before that. I got a personal record in the marathon at California. Wow. And since then, I've done a few races for fun. I'm taking a little bit of time off, and we'll probably get back into it. But that being said, once a runner, always a runner.
Yeah.
I am doing it more for fun. Like I'm not pounding it at workouts right now, but if I'm in a beautiful place, I kind of have that spot in my mind that makes me a little different. That's thinking, oh, this looks like a nice place to run.
My other question, and I ask a lot of cross-country people this, Houston is really a hub for great cross-country runners,
Yeah.
especially girls. But what are you thinking about?
When I'm running?
Yes, because you can't really have music.
Yeah.
And they all, you know what they all say? I would say over 50% say that they're praying.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. When I'm hurting, I definitely do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
When I'm really hurting or like in a race, I spend a lot of time doing that. I think what I found more recently, I'm really trying to enjoy running instead of, I think for a long time it was this, you have to do it. Like it felt like I needed to, right? It paid for my school. It was something that I felt obligated to do. And so now I'm more in this mindset currently where if I'm not enjoying it, I'm not going to do it. And so I spend most of my runs running with other people, which we're talking about the next coffee shop we're going to go to or something fun we're going to do that weekend, or just things going on in life. Whereas, in races when I'm hurting, it is a cross-country runner thing. I am definitely praying to get to the finish line.
Exactly. I'm praying to stop
Yeah.
and not die. But I could not be your partner because I couldn't be talking because I couldn't barely be breathing. So I find that fascinating. Y'all just running and you're just having nice and little conversation. That doesn't seem like I could do that. What do the Warners do for fun?
Oh, well, we have had an adventure recently because we're big dog rescuers.
I knew you were going to say that.
You did?
I don't. You're a dog person. I can tell it.
Definitely a dog person. And so we found this husky roaming our neighborhood, brought her in, went to get her shots, found out she was pregnant with 9 puppies.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. And so that's been an adventure in itself. We have 2 more puppies and her left to get adopted. Mind you, we have 3 of our own that have all fallen in our lap. So at the current time, we have 6 dogs at our home.
So that's fun.
On
it's not
days,
that fun.
On certain days, it's fun. On other days, I'm just like, what are we doing with our lives?
Oh, my Lord.
But we also, what's really fun for us, every year we go to Mammoth Lakes, California.
Yeah.
It's a Christian collegiate running camp for college athletes. And my husband and I actually got engaged there. I went as a college runner, fell in love with the camp, came on as a staff member, brought him. He started running some, and now we took over as directors. So we do that for a week to 2 weeks every summer in Mammoth.
Y'all are busy. I love that.
We love
Is he a runner? Or you made him a runner?
Kind of is. Yeah, he did an ultra. Like, I've never done an ultra, and now he says
freaks.
he's a better runner than me because he's done an ultra. But his first 50-miler beginning of February. So he does it. He didn't really train for it. I mean, he did like 5 miles a day, and then he just
Did
has
it
that
turn to
kind of
50?
like,
Yeah.
what is it, Goggins? David Goggins
Yes,
mindset
yes,
a little bit
yes.
on some days, some degrees, but yeah.
That's a great segue. What do you take from all of the like social media? Like you have a podcast,
Yeah.
but there's so much content as it relates to good or bad, right or wrong. I don't know, but there's so much content to sift through for mental health. Do you love it? What do you think?
Oh, no, I don't love it because I think everyone thinks they're a mental health clinician now, right?
Right.
And so, really, with good therapy, with evidence-based therapy for a mental illness, it takes hard work. It's more than you go to therapy one time and you're fixed. And so, if someone goes online and they post this video about this CBD gummy that cures all anxiety, well, of course, people are going to gravitate towards that over 10 to 12 weeks of therapy, right? And so, I think it's super dangerous. And I also think that we all feel the pressure. Like there was a time where I didn't want to be posting on social media all the time, but now you kind of have to in that
That's a
world,
great
right?
point.
And so I think that that leads to more stress. So we're doing what we can with it. I think we're really the key to all of this though is finding a way to enjoy it because if not, I think your mental health is going to take a toll.
Interesting. You seem kind of like a spiritual person as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. How does that weave into what you do?
Yeah, so really with evidence-based practice, I am big on, for OCD specifically, that's what I specialize in, OCD, perfectionism, and anxiety disorders. I am going to stick to exposure with response prevention. That being said, really cool part of what I do, I'm a Christian, go to a non-denominational church. Cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on leaning into uncertainty. Faith Christian faith is a big part of that is trusting and having faith in uncertainty. And so I feel like there's so much beautiful overlap. And that being said, any evidence-based clinician is supposed to kind of walk with someone on their faith journey, right? But even some of the terms that I use in my practice, although it doesn't directly scream I'm Christian,
Right.
I think there's so much overlap that you can see interwoven.
Okay, so you got athletes, right?
Mhm.
They're great to work with, but just regular college students. I think so many kids go through anxiety in high school, in college, and I don't know what it is, if it's change or just, it's hard to be uncomfortable sometimes.
Right.
Why do you think it's more relevant now than maybe in the past, or was it always there?
Yeah, no, I think that people are open more than they were in the past. I also think that therapy was something, excuse my language, but everyone thought crazy people go to
Right.
therapy
Yeah.
before. Now therapy's cool, it's trendy. And so people are just able to speak up about it more. I do think that our mental health is in a worse off place because of things like social media and having everything at your fingertips at all times. Mostly, though, I think the main problem with society is gosh, I sound so negative when I say that. The problem is society.
Yeah.
But
The funny part is you're kind of the opposite of negative.
But the main thing that's a struggle is we have everything at our fingertips and we want it now, right? And so as a society, we don't know how to sit with our thoughts anymore. We have to be distracted 24/7 at all times. How detrimental for you to not be able to sit with your thoughts, right? To be bored, right? To be able to recoup and rejuvenate by even just having kids be bored. I think there's this great book, The Anxious Generation, and it talks about how a kid falls off a playground now in school, and so that the school doesn't get sued, they remove the item from the playground. Well, that is the prime time for kids to learn risk development, right? Like to take risk. Oh, I'm not going to jump from that swing anymore. That really hurt. But now we're taking all risks away. We're making sure that kids don't have any boredom. That's where creativity flows. And so I think as an adult society, we're doing that. Of course, kids are going to follow. And it's dangerous.
Dude, you just blow my mind by what you just said. That was
Like in a good way or a
no, that was just like, wow.
Okay.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But you have to have, honestly, here's the thing. Your parents,
Mm-hmm.
what was their role in this?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tie it back.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think love you, mom and dad, but anxiety is genetic, right? So I
Yeah.
do think that anxiety has been carried down
Okay.
as part of things. I also think that my parents are both very successful individuals, and they had some high expectations. And because I'm an anxious person, like if another kid had high expectations on them, they would have responded completely different. But I already put high expectations on myself, and although, you know, they were super supportive the whole time, I think I interpreted it incorrectly and felt more pressure at times and didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
So that's, I think that it's good to have parents that are driven, because I also think the alternative right now that we're seeing with my generation is this gentle parenting approach. And I have a million things to say about how that's not always the best option either, right? My parents' generation was like, I'm just going to throw you in the pool, you'll learn to swim.
Right.
And then this generation is, oh, how do you feel about going in the pool, right? Do you want to? And then, of course, if they're afraid to swim, they're not going to. And we need to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah. A lot to
Okay.
figure out still.
That's a lot. That's okay. I guess why, because I'm asking that is that like your parents might be, they were maybe trying to help you or just like talking to you off the ledge or this, that, and the other. But it's hard for kids to not take advice from their parents, but when you
Right.
have someone else like yourself or someone else that can like knows what they're talking about,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
can, it really sinks in.
I was going to say,
That makes sense.
totally.
Yeah.
I have a lot of athletes right now that I see that are in high school, middle school. And it's so funny because at the end of our sessions, I might meet with a parent for 5 minutes present as well. And the parent will say, well, they're doing so much better, but I've been telling them that same thing for years. And I'm like, well, yeah, but it's coming from you versus coming from me. It just hits differently. And so that's a great point. A lot of the time, my parents did say, Callie, you don't need to worry about that, or Callie, everything will be fine here. But it was coming from them, right? And I didn't process it the same way as I would with a practitioner.
That's what, yeah. And that's why it's so valuable. Let me ask you this. Are you seeing more college programs? And I think this is going to happen in high school where you become a consultant for maybe college athletes or colleges in general and
Yeah.
or ISDs and school districts.
Yeah. So I love what I do at the clinic that I'm at for that reason, because we will get a lot of inquiries and people won't always be the best fit. And you know, I might be biased, but you know, it's a good clinic when they say we're not the best fit. Here are the referrals for that evidence-based therapy. I think that there is a problem in the sport world today where athletes are more prone towards, well, let me just pursue sports psychology, which is amazing. I love sports psychology, right? I got my CMPC because I love sports psychology. But I think we have to recognize that there's two lanes. Athletes that are struggling with mental illness should see a mental health provider. Athletes that are wanting to enhance their sport performance should see a sports psychologist. And I think the lanes are getting muddled too much, which can actually do more harm than good.
That does make sense. You're making a lot of sense. It's
Great. I'm glad we're all
God,
learning.
yeah. What are, just for kids or parents, what are the traits that you can see that makes a great athlete's mental makeup?
Yeah,
Was that a great question?
I
That was a
think
great
that
question.
was a great question. Yeah, so there's different types of motivators. We've got intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, approach motivation, avoidant motivation. If someone is fully extrinsically motivated, right? Like I want a scholarship, or I want to make sure that my coach is proud of me. Those are all extrinsic motivators and actually lead athletes to feeling more anxious. Athletes that are motivated because I want to feel good about these accomplishments, or I want to feel like I left some kind of destiny for people to follow. I think those individuals have it honed in a little bit more. We also know that the athletes that are approach versus avoidant motivated. So avoidance is, I don't want to mess up on this. Approach is, let me quicken my steps. And that's another indicator of higher levels of success. The last thing is, how do you talk to yourself? Plain and simple, right? If you mess up, are you dwelling on that and holding on to it for days? Well, that's going to impact future performances, right? Versus, are you recognizing that the best athletes in the world, a part of the dues is to mess up along the way, and you have to pay those dues too. So a lot of it's about mindset, a lot of it's about what motivates you, and a lot of it's about, are you having fun along the way? Because I think that's really important.
Where does the fun come in? It's
Yeah,
got to, right?
It's got to. Because I mean, if you are planning to do this long term and you're not having fun, well, you're probably way more susceptible to mental health struggles along the way. And like I said, I became resentful of my sport when I was struggling because I didn't know how to do it for fun anymore. It was all tied to these terrible things will happen if I don't engage in these rituals or compulsions. And I had to relearn how to have fun with my sport again, which I will gladly say I was able to do. It took a long time, but worth the work.
Wow. Okay. So then your husband, he knows, like how does that relationship work? Do you tell him early on,
Yeah.
and then can he see, hey, this might be going on, or you're kind of through all
Yeah,
that?
I was in a much better place with it when
Yeah.
I met him. That being said, even looking at when we first met, to where we're at now, like, we just had our 6-year anniversary, I think. I'm still in a completely different place than I was even when
Right.
we first met. So he came to some of my talks. I was already doing a lot of advocacy and things like that then. And so it's so funny because sometimes, people will say I'm so OCD, but what they're describing is type A personality. And so sometimes I'll catch him correcting someone. Actually, that's not OCD because he's come to so many of my talks. So
Yes.
he's got a good understanding of it and has been supportive, which is really great.
You would be a hard person to argue with.
You think so?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, she has all the answers, and she's like, she knows what I'm getting ready to ask.
Talk to me about politics, engineering, any of that stuff. I am so
You're a
lost.
no.
I'm out the door.
I'm kind of a no also. All right, are you bingers? Are you binge TV watchers?
I mean, if we had more time, we probably would be. I'll be honest, but we do watch shows at night, like an episode or two here and there.
Yes.
We're currently still on Modern Family. We just finished Breaking Bad.
That was like circa
I know.
2010.
I'm a late bloomer. But the up-to-date one that we're watching is Shrinking, and I love it.
Yes.
So
I have. I think the cast is like wildly, like they're amazing cast.
yes,
But-
Harrison Ford's my favorite.
Oh, I need to start watching that because somebody just told me about that show also. So now what's the future? What are we doing?
Yeah, well, I would love to, at the clinic at OCD Institute, somehow incorporate a lot of, like, a sports-specific wing. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but somehow, some way, I want more athletes to have a place where they can do intensive treatment to get back to their life. I think people often hear intensive treatment and they're terrified. Well, I'm not debilitated or I'm not struggling. And some people go to intensive treatment just because they've got to get back to their life quicker. You think about 45 minutes once a week or every other week versus, oh, I'm going to be in treatment center for a few weeks and it's going to be condensed. That's another reason people do this. And so a lot of athletes have crazy schedules and they need something more condensed. And so I want to just decrease the stigma around it.
We're working. We have a lot of former athletes or professional. I'm talking about professional athletes,
Right.
and then they're done at 30.
Yeah. Some of
And
my
then
favorite
they're
people to
like,
work with.
dude, what do we do now?
Mhm.
And that's a big issue
Yeah. One of my
because it is their identity.
right. One of my favorite interviews that I'll never forget. There was an athlete and they were saying, well, I became okay. Like I struggled for a while after the Olympics, but I became okay because I found a way to compete again in a different path. And so they became competitive in their career path. And that got me really thinking athletes really do have this extra notch that
They do.
needs to be watered, if you will. And if you don't learn how to water that, then it's going to feel like almost like restless leg syndrome is how I would word it, right? It's just unable to move it. But if you can plug into another source and still have that drive, that motivation, and use it to its full ability, I think you're going to be okay.
What about when you do this camp? I think that's really cool that you'll do
Yeah.
that camp in California. But I'm not gonna say how young is too young,
Mm-hmm.
but like if you're an athlete or you're trying to, get fine-tuned or you've got some things you need to work on, how young is too young?
Yeah, I would say there's never too early
Right.
of a time. I would say the therapy looks a little bit different. At our camp, we take juniors and seniors in high schools up to college age athletes. But I think when it comes to, okay, I'm noticing some symptoms of anxiety in my kid or in my athlete who's in middle school, but I don't know if it's going to be anything, you never regret doing the preventative work. You never do. It gives you the tools because what I tell people is, okay, as life gets more stressful, what do you think is going to happen with these symptoms? They're not just going to go away, and they're only in middle school and they're struggling to turn in their assignments on time because of their anxiety or rechecking behaviors. Well, I would rather get them those skills before they get to college when deadlines are more intense so that we don't have to have stuff hit the fan.
I have this vision in my mind also. Do you ever freak out when like your husband has to go on a fire call?
I tell
I can
him
see
not
you like
to.
I can see you running by the fire truck.
Yeah, I don't live by the station anymore, which I think is a healthy thing.
Okay, good. Yeah. Everybody would be like 75 pounds overweight because you made them cookies all the time.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, but
That was like well played.
thank you.
Well
I
played.
appreciate it. Yeah, but I think that my mother-in-law has an app.
Yes.
He's gonna be so embarrassed that I'm sharing this. She has an app, and so she knows when he's fighting fires when. And so she used to message me and say, Callie, Tyler's at this fire right now. And I was like, this is not good for my mental health. I need to know after the fact. So I had a great conversation with him and her about just like not telling me until after. And I guess that's my ignorance is bliss mentality.
That is not bad. But here's the thing about firemen. You know this better than anyone. It's not just fires that they roll up on.
Oh, yeah.
So what I'm saying is you gotta, do you help him kind of unwind from, you really can't unsee what you see.
Right. I would say most firefighters, because I've talked to a lot of his buddies about mental health specific things, but most firefighters have an on and off switch. And so they're on at work. I kid you not, Tyler will see some of the most intense things after work, and I will ask him and he will say, I don't remember. But not like avoidance, like he truly does not remember the specific details of some of these horrible things. I do tell him that that's probably not the best. That's got to come up in other ways. But I do think a lot of them turn it off until they can't. And, that whether that be because a firefighter sees something terrible happen to a kid and they have kids of their own, there's times where they know, okay, this is something that I do need extra support for. And Houston Fire Department's doing better about providing resources.
You got, okay, so what you're podcasting, what is the podcast? Tell me what the platform B, what are you trying to educate people on?
Yeah, it's called the Anxiety Society Podcast.
That's what
I picked the name.
You did or didn't?
I did, yeah.
I like
I
it.
picked the name. It's with the program director of OCD Institute, Elizabeth Mackingvale, Mattress Mac's daughter. I hate that I plugged her that way. She's known just as her own, but
right.
Was the first ever national spokesperson for OCD. And we really wanted it to be more layman's terms. So teaching the general population about different mental illnesses, when to get help, when to know you're working with a good therapist versus a bad therapist. And we really just dive into the mental health nuances of today with some clinical knowledge for clinicians, but it's more so to just educate the general population as a whole, because at this day and age, let's face it, we all have anxiety.
True. Well, hey, follow that for sure, because I think that's where I was following you, and then this kind of connected. I'm like, that's really cool. We got to call you and just say, hey, you got to come out and tell us about, the world of sports and your path.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a great journey or a path, and you're still a baby. Like, you still got so much journey to go. But we're excited to see where this all goes, and us provide a service to, like, hey, if you feel like you're kind of in this headspace, like, look, this is a former VYPE Covergirl that is now the superstar in this industry.
Oh, it's so funny. My main memory from VYPE, it was me and two other distance guys, runners, and I remember we had a picture, and I thought one of them was cute at the time. And they asked, the person taking the picture said, well, lift her up. And I was so embarrassed because I was probably bigger than both of them at the time. And I was like, great, now they're not going to like me. Come a long way, but I was much taller and bigger than two.
That is funny. I think that was like at Legends or something like that.
Yes.
Holy cow. See, we're just making
memories.
Making memories. All right.
It's a core memory.
Hey. Thank you for coming on. Cali Werner.
Pleasure.
Tremendous job. We're going to put all of her information on the screen as well. This is Matt with VYPE. We'll see y'all at the games. Like and subscribe as usual. We'll see y'all next time.
Peace.
Boom.
Awesome.